This is Listening with Franklin Livingston, and our guest is Christine Stoddard Sánchez.
And talk to me about your travel history.
Oh, yeah. First of all, I would love to go to Japan. That is my next dream vacation out of the country. I've traveled a fair amount. So when I was a little girl, we went to Canada several times as a family. And I've been there as an adult. I want to go back. We went to Mexico as a family. And then when I was in college, I went there. Had a really unusual experience as an art student interpreting Spanish to English between medical students from my school, VCU, medical and nursing students from VCU, and doctors and nurses and social workers in Mexico. We had this partnership with the University of Guadalajara, and we toured hospitals and clinics and learned about how the medical system works in Mexico. And then we also went to this, I don't even know, like refuge, like a shelter for children who had been forced into sex work. And these were children who had been rescued, I guess is the word to use, so that they could go through therapy and try and live a normal life, get an education, and be kids. But I did a project where I had the American medical students use disposable cameras with the children, and they went all around the gardens there and just took photos, and they got to practice their Spanish. The children, none of them knew any English. So there was a lot of like body language that was happening, a lot of miming between the children and the medical students.
Oh, when was it?
This is 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because nowadays I use an app. Previously it was the same thing, a lot of body language.
Yeah.
So now whenever I land in another country, I just get unlimited data.
Yeah.
And then I use the apps to
all kinds of translation. Yeah. Also in college, I did a lot in college, a lot of travel. I was lucky. I stayed with a French family one summer
in France,
in La Rochelle, and
north or south.
Well, it's more northern. It's on the West Coast. It's a beach town, and yeah, it's beautiful. And the family didn't speak English, and the rule was that I would not speak English unless there was some kind of emergency. So I had to sign a contract, and there were American students in my program who did live with families who spoke English, but in my case, speaking English wouldn't have really helped because that family didn't speak English.
So how did you communicate?
I had to speak French the entire time.
Oh, so you learned French.
I had studied French in school in Virginia, and then I went to go live with that family. So my French was okay, but I wasn't fluent in French. So
still, you were able to explain.
I had to do everything in French.
Hey guys, my bathroom got clogged.
All of it.
Bonjour.
I got locked out at one point and had to beg the groundskeeper to let me in, but he didn't have the key for my room, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, the mom was a social worker, so she was looking after this little girl once in a while who was mentally delayed. And I remember once I got stuck like kind of babysitting her, the 12-year-old. My friend
didn't know English at all.
No, she knew not, and also it was so funny because I remember the day I met her, the girl looked at my French mom and she was like, "How come she talks like that?"
She didn't like your accent?
Yeah, my French mom said, "It's because French is not her native language." French is a language that she learned in school. The little girl's like, okay, but very judgmental of how I'm speaking. Yeah. She's like, all right, okay. But the day I had to babysit her, my French mom just dropped me off with the girl, at Harry Potter. And it was whatever the newest Harry Potter movie was at the time. So I was watching it in French, no subtitles, having to explain to this little girl who, was a little behind and everything at school, what's going on. And she's just confused about everything. And I'm like, trying not to be loud at the movie theater, but also getting frustrated.
Yeah, certain words, when you change the pronunciation, they might not sound different only, its meaning might be different too.
The French father, was so particular because he was Parisian, and the Parisians have a reputation for being very particular about how people speak French, right? And I swear to God, even if I hadn't been living with his family to learn how to speak French, he was the kind of person who would have corrected my pronunciation. He was just that kind of guy. Yeah, he was just constantly correcting everything I said. Okay, I'm here to learn, but...
How long did you stay there?
It was just one summer. Yeah, so 6 weeks. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And, I've traveled to a bunch of places since then. So in 2024, last year, barely, but last year, I went to Mexico again. But I went to Mexico City for the first time in my life. I'd never been there before. And that was incredible. And I went to...
In what way?
I had never seen the pyramids before. So that alone was wonderful. And I had always heard, Mexico City is... And I... read, right? So I knew, it's this huge city. And I live in New York. It's not a tiny place, but Mexico City is much bigger. It's much, much bigger. So New York felt almost small in comparison. And I'd never been in a Latin American country before that, a city where there were so many different groups of people because, like in El Salvador, it's very homogenous. Almost everyone's Salvadoran. In Mexico City, you have Chinese Mexicans. You have, you have all kinds of people there. So you have all kinds of immigrant cultures, and I hadn't...
But they all speak Spanish?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like in New York, all the immigrant cultures speak English or try to, right? And so I had not seen that in a Spanish-speaking country before at that level, and that was really cool. And I went to Guatemala for the first time in May, and that was through Colombia. They had given me this grant. I took some oral history classes before I went into the journalism program, and I had wanted to learn more about Mayan culture because my mom, historically, she has the heritage, right? But in El Salvador, they don't have a strong indigenous support for, they don't have governmental support for indigenous culture. And there was even a government ordered genocide of indigenous people in the 1930s or 40s, and it precipitated the Civil War there. So today, in El Salvador, you don't really... It's very hard to find indigenous people who are thriving. There aren't that many indigenous communities. In Guatemala, it's the opposite. There are a lot of living Mayan people. This is not a historical thing. They're alive today. They have their languages and their traditions. And I wanted to experience that. I wanted to see it. I wanted to also learn. I'm such an art nerd. I just took a 4-hour weaving course with a Mayan woman. She gave me this private workshop in her Mayan way of weaving that she learned when she was 7 years old, and she's been doing ever since. I just wanted to have that experience and connect to my roots. And, part of me is the cynical part of me is that's the hippie white girl in you, right? Because my mom has no interest in that. She's like, why would I do that? That's I'm a mestiza woman. I'm integrated. I speak Spanish. I don't do these indigenous things. And I don't think like, there's no malice in her when she says that. It's just she's not curious about that. And I think it's, again, going back to childhood, like, that's what's been reinforced is, oh, you in her country, a lot of people will claim their Spanish heritage, but they're not going to claim their indigenous heritage, even though the majority of people there are mixed. Yeah, but it was beautiful for me to do that, and I'm happy that I did.
You went to Mexico.
Yeah, I've been there a few times.
Latin America.
What do you say?
It's Latin America, right?
Yeah.
What was the difference between the humans of Mexico versus the humans of the US?
I would say, as a positive stereotype, Mexicans are very warm. And this is every part I've been to in Mexico has been like this. When I went to Jalisco, and this was for that college experience I mentioned earlier, I stayed with a farm family who gave up their bed for me. And I didn't realize this until the next morning. I was there with an American nursing student, and she and I slept in the same bed together because that was the only option. And the next morning at breakfast, I saw the family's like blankets and pillows in the living room. And I realized, like, they only have one bed for the mother, father, and I believe it was 2 children. That was, yeah, just such a kind thing to do, to not make us sleep on the floor. They didn't have a sofa. Yeah, there's a lot of generosity when it comes to cooking. Just Mexicans want to feed you and keep feeding you. And yeah, there's just like an openness, a friendliness. In the United States, I think it depends region by region. In New York City, people can be helpful, people can be kind, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily friendly. Obviously, there are exceptions, but like overall, I think the culture is more like, we have things to do, we're busy, we're getting on the subway, we're going to work, we're going to school. Oh, you need directions? Okay, let me help you with the directions, and then I'm going to keep going. Oh, you need help with the stroller? Okay, let's carry the stroller up the stairs. Oh, going to keep going. My boyfriend does it all the time. He's a big guy, so he's constantly like helping little old ladies with their shopping cart up the stairs at the subway. There's no conversation that takes place after that because there's no time. It's just, thank you, okay, bye, and keep going. Yeah. When I lived in Iowa and when I lived in Virginia, more so in Richmond than when I was in Northern Virginia, people were definitely more about taking their time. And they would ask you about your family and what was going on with this and that. And let's talk about the weather. I definitely prefer the New York way of being. I think when people say, oh, New Yorkers are so rude, I don't think that's what it is. I think it's just people have their schedule. And again, like, I see a lot of kindness. I see a lot of people like, oh, you dropped your glove. Here, let me pick it up for you. They're just not going to stop and chat with you for 15 or 20 minutes necessarily. That being said, I've had conversations with strangers in New York. It happens.
So, because US is an individualistic culture.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of Latin, Asian, South American cultures are more communal culture.
Right.
So that's the difference. But if the schedule is same, say somebody works in a bank.
Yeah.
8 to 4, 9 to 5. Banking might be the same in every country. Mm-hmm. Same most of the countries.
Yeah.
Right? Can someone make time for the other person? Is that different in the US versus in Mexico? Oh, because I haven't been to Mexico, so I don't know.
I mean, in my experience, people are just not so rushed in Mexico. and many other countries. It's just
again, it goes back to the question we were talking about. What's the end goal?
mm,
And I learned this through my travels. You almost accomplish the same thing.
yeah,
It's like driving. Sometimes when we are young, like I was not the most wise when it came to driving as a very young person. So later on, I learned if you go, say, 60 miles, you have to drive, and your speed limit, whatever you're doing, maximum, it can make 10 minutes difference. But on the cost of you can die, you can
right,
kill somebody else,
right,
and you can get arrested. Your driver's license can be canceled. So the cost is very high, but that 10 minutes can save your life and someone else's life. And so in many cases, tons of people's life. Because if
Yeah.
you hit a bus full of passengers, so then,
Yeah.
the same thing, talking. I
Mhm.
want to talk to you about hosting friends, you mentioned,
Yeah,
which is also not very common. Everyone does not do that.
yeah,
It's so, like, I love history, especially when it comes to church history. I was watching something on YouTube. I usually watch those videos that show up instead of me typing it,
Right,
documentary types. So, the Roman Greco world, which was the supreme power, before 3rd century, a group of people that was meeting to eat and share, that became the most powerful group. That was Christians. And they didn't do anything special. It was just eating together.
right.
Because when we eat, we open up. We feel in the Midwest here, it's a little different kind of culture here, but I still remember my first week at the grad school, and I think the financial aid guy, there was another student. We were sitting in that cafeteria, student lounge cafeteria, and one guy asked the other, "Hey, do you know Franklin?" And he said, "Yeah, we just went out to lunch the other day." So eating together meant it's a stronger bonding.
Right. Yeah,
It's a connection. It's not that I just lifted your stroller, as you mentioned, which is great. When that's like contribution to the larger community.
Yeah.
We belong to the same community. We're helping each other, but there is nothing after that. There's no strengthening of relationship. What if I need at some point in my life, you are there for me? I don't know whom to reach out to. And
Right.
a lot of people say, I don't know how old you are. You don't have to tell me. A lot of people say in 30s, making friends in New York City is almost impossible. But you are doing that. How? How do you get that
Yeah.
inspiration? How do you do that? How do you actually make people to come? A lot of people just keeps on canceling.
Yeah, I think a lot of those relationships started because we made something together.
Made like painting or art
Or video,
food?
yeah, some kind usually some
never
kind of
know.
art, yeah,
Okay.
art or media. And then yeah, there's vulnerability that can come from that. The creative process can or should be, I think, about opening up in some ways. And you get to know a person better through that. And there's risk taking that art involves. And yeah, there's a bond that can come from that. And as time goes on, you might become the person who also watches after someone's dog when they go out of town, or oh, they need to go to the hospital and they don't have anyone else to drive them. Can you drive them? And they'll do the same thing for you. But for me and for my boyfriend too, because we make a lot of work together, and many of our friends are mutual friends at this point. The entry point tends to be something that's creative.
But how do you sustain it? Somebody asking somebody to take me to a hospital
Yeah.
because I can't drive.
Yeah.
I think in this culture it's not easy. So, because you feel, oh my God, I don't know, it's a fear of being judged or whatever.
Yeah.
But people, and I learned this. I was told you don't ask those kind of favors, right? And I was told because, hey, you should know this. We don't do that here because you come from a different culture. But people don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you take it to that levels after making a short film?
Yeah, I'm pretty selective about who I let into my life. And even creatively, like I try and be discerning, and learn through trial and error who I can trust and who maybe I shouldn't trust. And then I try and maintain relationships if I feel like we have a good foundation together. If it seems like our friendship can go deeper and we can be more than colleagues, then yeah, I try and keep in touch. I think a lot of people forget to check in with each other, or they feel embarrassed about it. Like you were saying, oh, we don't do that. Some people will say, oh, we don't do that. Okay, well, I question things. Just because other people don't do it, why? Why don't they do it? I can do it. Why can't I call somebody? Why can't I send a text or email like, hey, I've been thinking about you. How are things? Are you okay? Or, hey, I saw that Facebook post you made. Or do you want to talk about what's going on? Because people will leave clues, right? That maybe not all is well.
You also feel rejection?
Yeah, of course.
You open yourself. You invite them into your life. Let me listen to you.
Yeah.
But next person either doesn't reply to you or says, no, I'm okay. Thanks for checking.
Yeah.
Period.
No, there was a friendship of mine that ended during quarantine, and I realized that things had to come to an end because I clearly felt the friendship was more valuable than she did. And I noticed like she would never check in with me because it should be mutual. And I'm not saying it has to be transactional, like, oh, I checked in with her this time. Now it's her turn. I won't reach out until she's done it. But if you notice, as I did in this case, that, oh, I'm always initiating and she's not really asking questions about me. She's not really listening to me. She's not really giving me a chance to be vulnerable. It's just about when she needs help. Okay, that's a friendship that probably doesn't need to last any longer. Can gradually phase that out. No ill will, but hey, energy's limited. I don't have all the time and love in the world, right? Yeah, there can definitely, I mean, I used to be married. And one of the reasons why I left that marriage was because I realized I was the one who was doing most of the emotional labor, and it was exhausting to not have that reciprocated. I think it's important to accept that rejection is a part of life. I think some people will just let it discourage them and they'll shut down. Oh, well, I better not try that anymore. Or, oh, the last time I took that kind of risk in friendship or in love, it didn't work out, so I'm not going to do it again. Yeah, you can learn from past experiences. It doesn't mean you need to stop doing certain things altogether necessarily. Obviously, it depends on what it is and the circumstances. But I see rejection as necessary and as a way that's helped me focus my life and made me really value the people who are there for me and the people who we're not just doing superficial things together, but I can tell you actually care about me. I care about you, and it's reciprocated. It's not just a one-way street.
So we were talking about eating, bodies. You use the term overcorrecting and how it affects an average person's energy and their contribution into other people's lives as well as the community.
Yeah, I used to be 40 pounds smaller, and not that long ago. It was just a couple of years ago. And I gained this weight. This is the heaviest I've ever been in my life. And I'm still considered within a healthy weight range, but I am much happier. And I'm happier because I have more energy. I find that I'm not putting such a strain on other people, because people get annoyed or embarrassed, uncomfortable if they want to cook something for you and you're not going to eat it, or if they notice that you're not enjoying it if you do eat it. I would just find myself in situations where, like work situations, different shoots, for instance, or interviews where there would be food available, but I would be so particular about what I could eat that I would tell myself I couldn't eat anything there, or just one or two things, right? And it really wasn't fun for my family or my friends. They did not enjoy watching me obsess. I did it because my ex was really into fitness. He was really into calorie counting. He kept a spreadsheet. As far as I'm concerned, he probably still does, if I had to wager a guess. That was not how I was raised. I was raised to enjoy food. And honestly, I think my mom in particular did it in excess. She's always had problems with impulse control, but that often happens with people who were raised in poverty, that once they do find themselves in a stable situation, they eat too much because it's like this famine mindset, right? So I was a chubby kid because she would overfeed me. And when you're a little kid, baby fat is fairly normalized. It's something that naturally many people lose. And I did. And when I was in 7th grade, because I had such a growth spurt, I'm actually the same height as I was in 7th grade. I reached my full height in my very early teens when I was like 13 years old. With that growth spurt, I became very skinny. And then I started to gain some more weight in a healthy way. But yeah, I was with my ex for a long time. We started dating in high school, and just little by little, I became as obsessed as he was. And there were times where, I can say it now, but during that relationship, it was hard for me to admit how much control he had over my diet too, because he was raised to be a calorie counter like that. But yeah, now that I have a more relaxed approach to eating, I think about what I need to get the energy that I want to have throughout the day. That for me, that's what it's about. Am I having a proportion of carbs and proteins, etc., that makes sense? Is everything, not exactly balanced, right? But does everything make sense in relation to one another? I try to have my lunch be the biggest meal of the day, so that my dinner is pretty light, and that way I'm not eating a lot right before I go to sleep. I don't skip breakfast unless there's a real problem. I don't skip breakfast because I do believe that's something that fuels you. I've just, whether in arts or in media, I've been around too many people who have obsessed over their appearance, and it has bothered me. I don't think that you're a more beautiful person just because you're smaller. And often having so much obsession over your food is just going to impact your energy and how you relate to other people, because your mind tends to be so focused on food that you're not relating to people in a healthy way on other levels. I used to work with a woman who fainted almost every single day because she just did not eat enough. And you could tell just by you didn't have to be a doctor. You could tell just by looking at her that she was undernourished. And this is somebody who was a mother, and she worked with children. She had to have a lot of energy, but she just wouldn't. She wasn't getting what she needed to be as active as she could have been. And for me, having the energy to do the things I want to do is one of the most important things. So when I realized that I was getting sluggish, I was losing concentration, that's when I knew I had to make changes. I needed to eat enough to sustain myself. Sure, I wasn't going to have cookies every single time I wanted to have cookies, but if I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. I just try and be smarter about what sort of snacks I have.